Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Irv Homer Show. It is the 15th of April, 2009, and the time is approximately 8 o'clock. You have until 12 o'clock tonight to file your tax returns for this year. The theme song, ladies and gentlemen, Tie a Yellow Ribbon Around the Old Oak Tree, is for the troops that are in Iraq, Afghanistan, Pakistan, around the world. And I don't forget the troops. I never conducted those rallies that were held, but I do know that we do have men and women, whether they volunteered or not, serving in the military. And I like the idea of tying a yellow ribbon around an oak tree and hope it is brought to life once again in our country. The emails and things that I sent out about being mad as hell and angry at the lies and deception that are going on in the media today have outraged me to a point that I promised myself when I left major market radio that those days were over and I was going to put them aside and forget about it and go on with a new life. Coming up on the second year anniversary of the death of my wife, I kind of resolved myself that you play the cards that you're dealt. And you have to learn that. And this is the way the cards are dealt when it comes to death or life or whatever tragedy may occur in your life. Those are the cards you're dealt, those are the cards you play. And so I kind of resolved when WWDB changed their format, and then upon the death of my wife on the 24th of April, 2007, that I was going to calm down a little bit and just smell the roses, make new friends, a new acquaintance, maybe a new partner. I've intended to remarry, but that's out of the question. But I do have a dear companion who has kind of made my life kind of worth continuing. But what has outraged me is listening to the news, and I'm not going to say major news media, the bloviators, or the television programs that are so popular today, but deal with why I'm outraged, why I sent out the email that I sent out. And I don't know how big this audience is, but it will be a catharsis for me to share with you why I'm outraged. The very people that are fomenting the teabagging today, some I know, some I don't know, but around the country. And as I said in my email, some of them were still weaning on their mother's breasts in 1981, 82, 83, and 84, when there was a tax protest movement in America that was not symbolic of tea bags. What you saw today was a symbolic gesture of a bunch of cowards, a bunch of promoters and hustlers on radio and television to, as I said on Monday's program, it was the escape valve on a pressure cooker. Let him shoot steam off. I believe in conspiracies, and I am almost convinced, ladies and gentlemen, that the national teabag movement that was conducted today was government sponsored. Why do I say that? The government knows that most Americans are cowards. They will protest. They will send symbolic gestures of teabagging, but will not jeopardize themselves, their safety, their fortunes in any way whatsoever. There's a very few of us who have been willing over the years to stick their neck out as I did, and as others that I know did in the 80s. I'll talk about myself first and not taking any credit for what I did because I felt as an American it was incumbent to do things the proper way. And that was to repeal the 16th Amendment, which is the amendment that gives the government the right to confiscate your earnings. Our Constitution gives you the right, through legitimate legal procedures in Congress and in the Senate, to change the Constitution, to remove an oppressive amendment, the 16th Amendment, which gives the government to violate your constitutional rights. And I can almost prove it with the information that I have going back to the 80s. And so I appeared as a talk show host, as a guest, on some 60 radio stations around the country. Received over 160,000 signatures protesting the 16th Amendment and our income tax laws that are confiscatory and are unconstitutional. I read Red Benson's 2 books called The Law That Never Was. The fact that the state of Ohio did not become a state until 1958 may sound strange, but somewhere along the line, Ohio forgot to ratify the United States Constitution, and so they became a state in 1958. Now, under our Constitution, you can't have ex post facto laws. You can't commit a crime today, be punished for a law that was passed, or commit a crime 10 years ago, and then be punished for it because they changed the law. So they made the 16th Amendment an ex post facto amendment, stating that, yes, indeed, the 2/3 that was required to approve the 16th Amendment, even though Ohio was not a state, they made it a state in 1958 to make the 16th Amendment legal. Violation of the Constitution. One of the reasons that I and many others took to the airways, not too many of us, and volunteers and people who were involved in the anti-constitutional 16th Amendment, to place ourselves at risk with the Internal Revenue Service and to place ourselves at risk with the United States government. People like Irwin Schiff, people like Dan Pilla, local gentleman by the name of Robert Graham in Bucks County. And so what we did was to petition the United States government, with the help of the people, to legitimately change the 16th Amendment and make a tax law that was constitutional. Number one, you can't have ex post facto laws in America. It's unconstitutional. I defy anybody, tax lawyer, accountant, to tell me that the 1040 form that you will file by midnight tonight is not a violation of the Miranda decision, in which any information that you volunteer can be used against you. That is unconstitutional. That's why the Miranda decision became part of the American system of jurisprudence. You're required to give your name, identification, but that's all. You're not required to say anything to any government official and volunteer information, because any information that you volunteer can be held against you. Well, when you disclose all the information on your tax form, you are volunteering information that the United States government and the Internal Revenue Service can use against you. And so they call the tax law voluntary compliance. I was involved in a debate with a caller of mine a few weeks ago who said, Irv, that's frivolous. Wait a minute. The words that people use, that government uses, is not frivolous. When the tax code is voluntary compliance, that means you voluntarily have the right to comply or not. So that is the second part of the unconstitutionality of the 16th Amendment. The Fifth Amendment also says you can remain silent because the information that is you give can be used against you. So if you take the Fifth Amendment in volunteering information, that can be used against you, you're using the Constitution. You're not going to volunteer any information. You may be able to use it against me. I don't know what the tax code is. You don't know what it is. Half the accountants don't know what it is. Half the tax lawyers, none of the tax lawyers know what it is. The IRS doesn't know what it is. So on those three basic premises, I appeared on 60 radio stations as a guest across the country. And I must applaud the management of WWDB at that time for allowing me to do it, because they were placing themselves at risk, which I will reveal later on in the program. People who I worked with at WWDB, who shall remain nameless, were handing notes to management behind my back. You better shut him up. You better fire him. You better get rid of him. Oh, yes, my colleagues, my dear brothers and sisters from WWDB wanted me to be removed from the air. Not because they were concerned about the IRS. They were concerned about the fact that my ratings were far superior to theirs, that I generated more revenue than theirs. In fact, was paid in such a way at WWDB. There was one gentleman on the radio station who in his contract said that no one that worked on WWDB could make more money than him in a salary. And I said, stick it in your ear. I'm leaving and going to WCAU Radio, who I was negotiating with. And what management then did, they gave me 2 checks. One matching the salary of this person who was on WWDB. The second check was as a talent fee. So I was making more money than him, and he didn't know it. To this day, he doesn't know it. So I have to thank the management of WWDB, the 3 or 4 owners. They're willing to go along with me, A, because my ratings were good, and second of all, because the revenue that I generated put money in their pocket. So what did we do? And what did these volunteers do who wanted to change the 16th Amendment, the income tax law, legitimately? Not tea bags, not frivolous garbage and demonstrations, and not place themselves at risk. Some of them formed churches, followed all the legalities of forming a legitimate church and becoming tax exempt. Churches do it. And so part of the tax protest movement was to form churches around the country and get a tax exempt status. Others filed their tax return with a protest letter in there, stating that under duress, I am filing this return. Some filled out their tax return with ink that in 6 months' time, the ink disappeared and all the IRS had was blank forms. Those pens cost $10 a piece. They were selling these pens all over the country. People were filling out their tax forms with the information. They couldn't audit them after 6 months because there was nothing on the paper. So the government then said, we will fine you $500 if you write or alter the IRS form in any way at all. So don't ever write anything on your tax return like, I'm mad as hell, I'm paying it. You better submit that tax form the way it is or they will fine you. Not for what you say, but the mere fact that you violated that form. So it was an insidious, gradual objection of the government and the Internal Revenue Service to fight the legitimate way to change the Constitution, the 16th Amendment. Men like Irwin Schiff, Dan Pilla, Bob Graham locally here in the Bucks County area, did everything legitimately and constitutional that they could, went to Washington, testified before the Senate, and all these people that are big shots today, the liars that I call them, and they are, this is a grassroots movement, this is a grassroots movement. I maintain that this movement was government-sponsored, this teabagging, to relieve the pressure of the Obama administration's policy of stimulus packages, TARP, and excessive borrowing. For those of you that do not remember, in 1968, in the Democrat Convention in Chicago, there were riots there. And after those riots calmed down, they discovered that the government had agent provocateurs in Chicago at the Democrat National Convention that actually caused the riots. And that's why I say, ladies and gentlemen, that this protest could have well been government sponsored, as was the Support Our Troops rallies that were held right after we went into Iraq, sponsored by the government, not by Glenn Beck, not by these guys that you hear, paid for by the Pentagon of the United States to form these Support the Troop rally movements all over the country, put the flag on your car. And these buffoons on radio and television today were part and parcel of the Support Our Troops. Where's the rallies today? Do we still have 130,000 or 160,000 troops in Iraq and Afghanistan? Do you see one rally? Because the bloviators are not going to rally anything until they are ordered by the United States government to have those rallies around the country with the Toby Keiths and the other fake phony patriots that they are. But getting back to the tax movement, so it was done legitimately by people like myself on the air, other talk show hosts throughout the country. But behind my back at WWDB, they were trying to stick a knife in my back to get me the hell off the air. Letters sent behind my back by the Internal Revenue Service to management. I requested and pleaded with the IRS to come on my program to explain to my audience that the 16th Amendment was constitutional. That the points that the anti-tax people, not the anti-tax people, the anti-16th Amendment people were saying was either a lie or true. They wouldn't come on my program. However, Susan Bray, who followed me, they came on her program. I passed them in the hall. I said, "Where are you cowards going?" Wouldn't talk to me. Ignored me totally. Susan Bray got angry as hell at me because I challenged the guest that she had. I was the one that got 160,000 signatures to amend the 16th Amendment, not her. I was the one that they sent a letter to the station management threatening the station under the First Amendment, not her. But she didn't have the courage to tell the IRS, go on Irv Homer show. He's the one that's raising hell, not me. But she, like the others, were political talk show whores and had them on the air. Fortunately, my listeners badgered the hell out of them. They didn't appear again. That's one of the reasons that I am so outraged over this fraudulent teabagging and nonsense that's been going on. One of the things in the movement, and I attended the meetings all over the Delaware Valley, in which the Internal Revenue Service was in the parking lot of town halls, firehouses, where we met, where the people met. I didn't call these rallies together. These were held by the people. I just went there to cover them as a talk show host. The IRS was in the parking lot taking down license tag numbers. This is in the 80s, not when Obama was elected, but during the Reagan administration. And yet, if you listen to the bloviators today, oh, it's the Obama, it's the liberals. No, it was the right-wing conservatives, the true patriots, you fake, phony, fraud talk show hosts. It was the true conservatives that said the 16th Amendment was unconstitutional. It wasn't the left-wing liberals like Michael Medved, that political whore, on 990 AM claims it's the left wing that's doing this. It was the conservatives that did it. The true patriotic Americans, like members of the John Birch Society, that felt America was being stolen away from them by the ignorance of the American people. And so today, if you hear any of the activity that's going on, it's the left wing, it's the liberals. Well, if you guys on the air were real conservatives, you would place yourself at risk. The founding fathers lost their fortunes, their homes, their farms, their money for principle. What principle do you have, Rush Limbaugh or Sean Hannity or Michael Medved or Mike Gallagher, where you're placing yourself at risk other than stirring up a lot of people to put tea bags as a frivolous demonstration? I've said on the air many times, and I say it again tonight, to celebrate the Boston Tea Party is to celebrate fraud and deception. Those 12 people who boarded the ships and threw the tea overboard and are acclaimed as heroes of America, and you think they were heroes. Well, do you know what they are? They're cowards. The Boston Tea Party was a bunch of cowards that did not have the courage to dress as the colonists that they were, but they dressed as Indians because they didn't want to place themselves at risk like the founding fathers did, or these whores, liars on radio and television today will not place themselves at risk because they are the Indians of the Boston Tea Party, masquerading as patriotic Americans, stopping the Obama tax oppression, while dressing as fake fraud patriots, as the patriots at the Boston Tea Party didn't have the courage to dress as colonists, but dressed as Indians. You know why I'm outraged and why I sent that out today? That's why. And that's why Irv Homer is banned from commercial radio. They know damn right well I can beat anybody's ratings on any radio station in the country today, including Limbaugh or any of the other ones, because I've done it against Limbaugh. When he was on when he was on our own station, I beat his ratings. They don't want the truth on radio. They don't want the public to be informed. They're part of the dumbing down of this country, and you're falling victim to it. And the people are falling victim to it. So you'll have the people going, I was at the Tea Party today in Center City, Philadelphia. I was in Atlanta with Sean Hannity. So what? Every one of them filed their return by midnight tonight. Not one of them will challenge the IRS in court, as Bob Graham did, and beat them. And the lying media reported that Bob Graham went to jail because of the taxes he didn't pay. Bob Graham went to jail because of the contempt of court after he beat the IRS. But the whores that are demonstrating today with their tea bags never supported the Bob Grahams, the Dan Pillas, the Irwin Schiffs. Irwin Schiff's books on Social Security being a scam and his way not to pay taxes is used in the colleges today to teach tax attorneys what the law is. Yet he went to jail. For doing what? Proving that the constitutionality of the 16th Amendment is a fraud? Let me read to you the letter that was sent to WWDB Radio. Not to me, the damn cowards. Behind my back, when I invited them to come on the air with me. Dear Sir, this is dated, ladies and gentlemen, November the 15th, 1982. This letter is to inform you of our concern about the content of certain programs broadcasted by WWDB. Didn't even have the nerve to put my name there. Your station and some of its guests have been making legal interpretations of the law in regards to the Internal Revenue Code, the constitutionality of the code, and applicability of constitutional amendments to civil tax determinations. These interpretations are incorrect and can subject those of your listeners who follow such interpretations to substantial tax, penalty, and interest assessments, in addition to potential for criminal prosecution. They never said what they were. Certain statements that were made. Well, what were the statements, you yellow-bellied bastards, in 1982? The constitutionality of the 16th Amendment has been firmly established by the Supreme Court in cases such as Brushaber versus Union Pacific Railroad Company. There is no valid legal basis, however, to state that the 16th Amendment or its administration is anything other than constitutional. Prove it. Now, listen to this. Now, if you are a linguist, if you can explain this next paragraph to me, sent by the Internal Revenue Service Code in Philadelphia at 600 Art Street, Department of Treasury, I wish you would. Although our system has been described as being based on voluntary compliance, no, my dear friend, it's not described. That's what it is. This does not mean that a taxpayer can elect to not file an income tax return. Well, wait a minute. If it's voluntary compliance, it doesn't mean you can't file a income tax. Well, what the hell does it mean? If a taxpayer has sufficient income, he must file a return per Internal Revenue Code, IRC Section 6012. Failure to file a required return subjects the taxpayer to civil and potential criminal penalties. So on one hand, in the paragraph, they say it's voluntary compliance. The other hand says if you don't, we're going to fine you and put you in jail. You want to live with a law like that? Well, that's what the hell you're living with right now. That's not a teabag version. That's what they say. Oh, there have been attempts to use the Fifth Amendment as a defense for failing to file a required return. The Supreme Court versus U.S. versus Sullivan, it was determined that the Fifth Amendment does not protect the taxpayer from his failure to file his required return. You file a return, don't put anything on it. Why can't you just file an empty return? Because the Fifth Amendment, ladies and gentlemen, does not protect you, the taxpayer, or anything that the government says it doesn't protect you for. In cases such as U.S. versus Edelson, U.S. versus Irwin, U.S. Section Code 72, it has been upheld for filing a document claiming a blanket Fifth Amendment privilege. So you either have a Fifth Amendment or you don't have a Fifth Amendment. Now make up your mind, dear friend. I didn't write the Constitution. Your station has had guests such as Jerome Daly, Marvin Cooley, and Irwin Schiff, who promote the filing of the Fifth Amendment document discussed previously. These individuals have all been criminally convicted of some violation of the Internal Revenue Code. Your station has also publicized one group that runs Fifth Amendment seminars in the Philadelphia area. The seminar alleges to show how to avoid the income tax. Doesn't say they do. It says alleges. The seminar teaches taxpayers how to file a Fifth Amendment document, and in addition, how to file a W-4 to eliminate withholding from their wages. The method used to eliminate withholding does not follow the applicable law. The filing of a false W-4 can subject the taxpayer to the $500 civil penalty and potential criminal sanctions. The obvious result of the Fifth Amendment document is the failure to pay required income tax liability. Now, the Fifth Amendment says you don't have to disclose any information that can be used against you. They interpret the Fifth Amendment under their own damn way they want to interpret it. In order to ensure that all taxes are properly paid, the IRS is reviewing all Fifth Amendment documents for examination. Taxpayers who have been examined have been assessed all applicable taxes, penalties, and interest. The assessments in the Philadelphia district have averaged more than $4,000 per return. In addition, each document is considered for potential criminal investigation. In the Philadelphia area, more than 20 taxpayers are under criminal investigation as a result of one such conviction. George Barnett was tried for failure to file, convicted, and sentenced to 1 year in jail. For using your Fifth Amendment right, you'll go to jail in America. The Fifth Amendment specifically states you do not have to reveal information that will be used against you. Now, what the IRS here says is what the law says. If you owe the government money, let them figure out what the tax is that you owe and you'll pay it. Not that you reveal information under the Fifth Amendment guarantee. The Fifth Amendment scheme. Oh, the Fifth Amendment is now a scheme, ladies and gentlemen, by the IRS. The whole damn Constitution, according to the IRS, is a scheme. The Fifth Amendment scheme is one of the many frivolous arguments being used to avoid taxes. No, it is not, you whores. The Fifth Amendment was a constitutional right not to reveal information that can be used against you. It's got nothing to do with taxes. Others include the gold standard theory, the claim that wages are not taxable or what Federal Reserve notes are not taxable. Very interesting. Because Dick Salyam of Baltimore said, I worked and got U.S. currency for pay. Now you want me to pay the debt in Federal Reserve notes. And all Dick wanted was a letter from the Internal Revenue Service stating that they would accept Federal Reserve notes in lieu of real money. That's all he said. Well, if Federal Reserve notes were real money and Dick had the money ready to pay taxes on it, why didn't they just say, yeah, we'll accept the Federal Reserve notes? Doesn't it make sense to you, ladies and gentlemen? Makes sense to me. So they've been trying to get Dick for years. He says, all you have to do is sign a piece of paper here that says, in lieu of real money, you will accept Federal Reserve notes. Now, if Federal Reserve notes are legal currency, why didn't the IRS sign that petition that he required? Congress in the recently passed Tax Act has instituted a $500 penalty against taxpayers who use a frivolous scheme to avoid paying of taxes. Although we are also concerned with some of your characterization of the Internal Revenue Service and the derogatory and often false, perhaps libelous remarks regarding individual employees, our main reason for writing you at this point is the misleading and incorrect interpretation of the tax law which you have disseminated. Well, I gave them an invitation to come on the air with me. Why didn't they do it? What the hell are they afraid of Irv Homer for at the time in 1982? How many of you people have ever written to your congressman or senator to find out what the tax law is? Well, here's a letter that I received back from Lloyd Benson, deceased now, Senator Lloyd Benson of Texas. Dear Mr. Homer, thank you for your recent correspondence. This was dated June 12, 1992, 10 years later. I figured maybe after they got all bent out of shape, they would finally revise the tax code and answer a question. I've noted your question regarding the constitutionality of the federal tax code. This is a matter that has long been addressed by the courts. Income tax filing is the obligation of every citizen, and although it is not mandatory to file a federal tax return, certain penalties will be imposed upon those citizens who choose not to file. Well, if it's not mandatory to file, Senator Benson, what the hell are you telling me for? That citizens who choose not to file can get penalties. You see the damn double talk that's been going on since 1982? When I wanted answers as a legitimate talk show host who paid his taxes or had them confiscated every week by my employer, which I testified in a grand jury hearing, when the IRS said, do you pay your taxes, Mr. Homer? I said, no. And they almost went ballistic. Well, you can explain? I said, yeah, my boss steals them every week before I get them. He pays them for me. I don't pay them. You think I'd write a check at the end of the year to pay these guys that are sitting here at this table? The other thing is you're waiting for your return for your taxes. You stupid idiots. What you get is a refund on the overpayment. You don't get no refund. The same way when you get a dividend from an insurance company or an insurance policy. It's not a dividend. You overpaid the premium and so they return it to you. Well, you overpaid your taxes, so they send you back the overpayment. God save me. A purely voluntary tax filing system would have the result of some individuals paying their fair share and others not paying. So under Section 6651 of the Internal Revenue Code, incidentally never been tested with the approval of Congress, guidelines are set for the failure to file a tax return or failure to pay federal taxes. So how can penalties be imposed if it's not mandatory to file a tax return? This is the true protest movement. Asking legitimate questions of politicians and the Internal Revenue Service Code to answer the questions. Don't give me possible, it's been judged constitutional, blah, 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 blah. Does the Constitution apply in the 16th Amendment or not? Why don't you just say, look, you can't take the 5th Amendment. Forget what's in the Constitution. Under the 4th Amendment, we can search and seize your records, your books, any damn thing we want. I'm not a lawyer, but I know enough about it. O.J. Simpson, ladies and gentlemen, was found innocent or not guilty, remember, of the death of his wife and Ron Goldman. That meant he was off the hook for their murder. However, if you remember, the Goldman family brought civil charges against him, and he was found guilty. But they couldn't try him for both at the same time. Well, the IRS, in violation of the federal code, can go after you civilly and criminally at the same time. Says so right here in their letter. Well, if the IRS can do it, why couldn't they do it with O.J. Simpson? Why don't they have one trial and find him guilty of civil and criminal charges? Am I getting too deep for you? One of the problems that existed during the tax anti-16th Amendment in 1980, 81, 82, 83 was the wackos and the government informants that infiltrated the legitimacy of the anti-16th Amendment movement. Some were agent provocateurs because as they checked our license tags, we checked their license tags and found out that some of them were agents of the Justice Department and of the Internal Revenue Service. So they infiltrated and stirred up the pot, wanting the people in the anti-16th Amendment to break the law, as they did in the Chicago Democrat Convention in 1968, as they did in Vietnam War demonstrations, as they do now during the Iraqi demonstrations that you never see on television. As you saw today with teabagging, there were agent provocateurs of the United States government in those teabag demonstrations because they know that the wackos, the hustlers, the fake phony frauds will infiltrate a solid, legitimate movement and destroy its credibility. So it was important to weed out the wackos that were selling coins and books and crystals and you name it. So there is a danger to everything. So that will end my reason for this so-called teabagging today as a fraud. As I said, some of those people that I work with are still alive today, knowing full well the cowards they were at the time, knowing full well that even today will not put themselves at risk because they got a good thing going, but they will stir up you, the Booba Summer. watching with the tea bags. They didn't take Sean Hannity's license. They took, I guarantee you, almost every license tag number that was at that tea bagging. Because the wackos, the government provocateurs, were probably all throughout the... And what about our so-called terrorists? And I can assure you Homeland Security was at that. And with reason. The enemies of this country will jump on any legitimate demonstration to destroy it. The communists did it with the Socialist Party in America. That's another story for another time. I see that I took 45 minutes of just the tax thing. I didn't even get into the lies of the pirating off the coast of Somalia. When I heard that OxyContin bastard Limbaugh referred to those pirates as teenagers. That fat yellow bastard has never had a gun pointed at his head by a 16-year-old teenager terrorist. Ladies and gentlemen, I have no way of knowing what kind of morons pay attention to that man. I can't listen, period. But in 1983, long time ago, 85, there was a man by the name of Klinghoffer, murdered by pirates that boarded the ship, the Achille Lauro. Hijacking has been going on all over the seas. I will terminate tonight's program with my blasting of the media, go into the hijacking, and the modern militia movement that Limbaugh and others have said this is the new phenomenon that is springing up under the Obama administration, that the people are outraged, and so the Obama administration, through Homeland Security, is now looking into various cells to find out whether there are people there that are storing ammunition, people there that may overthrow the government. Apparently these whores, liars, cowards, never heard of Gordon Call, never heard of Randy Weaver, never heard of the Branch Davidians. They were killed and murdered under the Clinton and the Reagan administration, while looking for these cells that Homeland Security is looking for today. And the hundreds of militia movements that have started going back to the 70s, where they were printing their own money, sticking up banks, holding up gold reserves. The ignorance and the lies and deceptions that are going out over the air today are so monumental that someone I don't get a heart attack. How can these radio stations, how can the United States government, who license radio stations, allow this type of lying, deceit, misinformation to go out over 600 radio stations 3 hours a day, 5 days a week is beyond me. We'll get into the hijacking myth of the liars on radio and television. We'll get into the militia movement that was back in the 80s when an FBI agent, a sniper, killed a woman holding her baby and put a bullet through both of their heads because they were part of this militia movement that was in existence before Obama, Not that these liars that are on the air today are saying it's because of the Obama oppressive tax program that the militia movement is starting, and so Homeland Security is now looking into whether or not you're buying bullets or not. This has been going on since the Vietnam War. You lying, misinformed whores on radio. I have no other words of malcontent and disgust for these people, and especially the assholes. Pardon my French, ladies and gentlemen. I beg of you to forgive me, but there's no other way I can express it. They're just dumb, stupid people in America. The blind people of Europe followed Hitler. The blind people of Russia followed Stalin. The blind people of Spain followed, what was his name? The blind people of Cuba followed Castro. The blind people of China followed Mao. The blind people of France followed Marshal Pétain. And the blind people of America are following the bloviators on radio and television today. Had the German people thought, there would have never been a Hitler. Had the Russian people thought, there would have never been a czar or a communist takeover. If the people in Spain would have thought, they would have had a dictator. If the people in the Philippines would have thought, they would have never had Marcos. The people in Panama, they would have never had Somoza. If the people in Cuba would have never had Batista. And if the people of America had any sense, they would overthrow these guys on radio and throw them the hell off and put somebody on there that tells the truth. And these stations should lose their damn licenses for putting these people on the air. And I'm not against government censorship, but these people do not belong on radio or television. Do they care whether they tell the truth? Did you ever hear one of these people say that we got an award for telling the truth? We report the news, not make it. Bullshit. All they talk about is their ratings. They don't talk about the truth. They don't talk about doing any common good. They don't do anything about making changes. They talk about ratings. Hitler had the best ratings in Germany, more so than Wagner's opera. Mussolini had better ratings in Italy than the Italian opera all over Europe, all over Italy, that had the finest singers, the Italian singers. Stalin had better ratings than a democratic movement that started in Czechoslovakia. So what is this crap about? We got good ratings. What about telling the truth? Did you ever see one of these guys ever get an award for being truthful or informative? Or trying to change the Constitution legally, like the tax movement did in the 80s? No. We got ratings. I could put a naked broad on television at 8 o'clock at night and get more ratings than O'Reilly. I could put two naked women on television at 9 o'clock and get more ratings than Hannity. So what the hell is it? I've got good ratings. There are more comic books sold in America than there are Bibles. Does that mean the comic books have better ratings? I'm Irv Homer, so I am. And we're being brought to you, broadcasting from irvhomer.com. My website is www.irvhomer.com. My email address is evilirv@irvhomer.com. And Ron Tech Show is now on Wednesday nights from 6:30 till 7:30. Change the time. And if you want to contact Ron's Computer Services for all your computer needs, you simply give them a call at 215-322-8685. 215-322-8685. You get your problem solved. I guarantee it'll be less expensive than going to some of these well-advertised computer techs. Sometimes even solved over the telephone. Once again, that number for Ron's tech program to call him is 215-322-8685 if you have a computer problem. Do we have anybody on the phone? No? Okay.
Not right now.
Our telephone number is 215-253-8877. We'll go to the website. Unfortunately, Irv, the facts in this country don't matter. These presidents can appoint Supreme Court justices to interpret the Constitution the way they want it. My dear friend, presidents have declared wars and the people took to the streets. See, you don't know the history of this country. When people took to the streets legitimately, they changed things. Presidents appoint whores. To the telephones. Good evening. How are you, sir?
Irv.
Yes, sir.
Long-time listener. I called you maybe twice before my long time of listening to you. The other night you were talking about socialism, and I was just wondering, because Edward G. Griffin always talks about socialism, communism, Nazism, and they're all under the same head of collectivism. Is that what you were kind of talking about?
No. What's collectivism? What does Griffin explain collectivism as?
He always talks about there's two forms. There's collectivism and individualism. And under the form of collectivism, there's two arms known as Leninism and Fabianism. Are you familiar with those?
Yeah, I'm familiar with Fabianism of California. Let me tell you something, my dear friend. Where I've disagreed with Ed Griffin in his book, The Creature from Jekyll Island, the book is accurate as far as his footnotes are concerned. Socialism can only be described by socialists. Capitalism can only be described by capitalists. Socialism is the social ownership of the means of goods and production. I mentioned the other night that the biggest form of socialism in America, nobody knows.
The stock market.
The stock market, where the people
Right.
own the means of production and distribution. If the people of General Motors who work there owned all the stock in General Motors, I guarantee you they would make a better automobile. They wouldn't be bankrupt. So the collectivism under socialism is a lie. Under socialism, the government is kept to a minimum because the people own the means of production and distribution. Can you accumulate money under socialism? You can have millionaires under socialism. You can have billionaires under socialism. But the people who make and provide the services share a proportionality to the time and effort they spend. If the manager of a socialized owned industry works 80, 90 hours a week, he is entitled to more than the employee is worth. So there would be millionaires, billionaires. They can start more than one business. You can have the social ownership of the means of production in 15 businesses that you own. Nothing's going to stop you. Government interference under socialism will be kept at a minimum because the people share in the profits of the revenue, and the government would operate on a minimum tax basis. So one of these days I'll... Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
But he was saying that, like, under collectivism is the government will do things for the good of the people to sacrifice the majority or the individual.
The government's role would be as it's spelled out in the Constitution of the United States. Period. It would not be in business to run businesses. We've advocated for years on the Irv Homer Show. The government has no right in the post office business. It has no right in some 900 businesses that the United States government is involved in. They don't belong there. It belongs to the people. They should not be running the forest. They should not be running the national parks. They should not be running the beaches. These belong to the people, and the people have a right to own them and benefit from whatever revenue is derived from them. So Ed and I,
he did say that like that would be known as individualism, but as the government institutes more laws, like they want to put a law on using your cell phone in your car, you're just losing more of your rights, and then they say
no. The government. You must remember, the government only responds to lobbyists who put money up. The insurance companies, because of the tremendous amount of money they have, institutes DUI, seatbelts, airbags, cell phone use, because the more people use irresponsibly all of the bells and whistles that are in your car, your cell phones, the CDs, the tape recordings, all the mechanical business, the GPSs, the insurance companies, because of irresponsible drivers, the premium must go up because the people are not responsible. Socialism makes the people responsible because they would lose the profit that they make in the insurance companies, because the people would own the insurance companies and demand that people drive responsibly. So I can go into a whole big discussion, but I want to move on. Thank you so much for calling. Do it again and we'll go into this a little further.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir. The late William
Bye.
Cooper questioned this system. Look what happened to him in addition to Milton Street. Well, of course, because you got nitwits. You got nitwits like the talk show hosts who are empty-headed, and the people who don't realize what Cooper and Milton Street were trying to do, trying to inform them. But they dealt with the personality instead of the business. Irv, with such a lazy, stupid American public, there's not much hope that we will ever regain powers we lost over the last 100 years, unfortunately. Well, when you have a defeatist attitude like that, and you listen to the bloviators that are on radio and television today, and the BS artists, and Dancing with the Stars and that other crap, of course you're going to be lazy and stupid. But don't blame the system. Blame the people. Next thing from our chat room. If Limbaugh or Hannity or Medved had such guts, why don't they run for office? Why should they run for office? They would have to produce something. I ran for vice president in 1972. I know what it's like. Why don't they? Just figure, Rush Limbaugh president, Sean Hannity vice president. Wouldn't all the problems of the world be solved? Cut me a break. Why isn't there a draft Rush Limbaugh for president movement in the Republican Party? He's the voice of the Republican Party. Why don't they draft him? You think he'd give up a $110 million job to be the president? That fake, phony, coward fraud who is such a super patriotic America wouldn't jeopardize that $100 million a year salary to be a pitting president of the United States. He could sit on television and complain and scream and make all kind of money and fly in a private jet and play golf. Can't do that as president. These guys are not patriots. They're economic whores is what they are, my dear friend. Irv, according to the research of Red Benson on the 16th Amendment in the book The Law That Never Was, many states did not follow the law and direction by the Secretary of State. That's right, on the proper way to ratify an amendment to the U.S. Constitution. I hear he's not feeling very well in this fight. Well, of course he's not, because Boobus America don't care. They'd rather have teabag parties. I just got done spelling out in the beginning of this program that if it's worth fighting for, there's a risk involved. There's even a risk involved right now in this little program that some nutcase IRS agent is out there. Well, screw you, IRS. I was born a man. I'm going to die a man. I'm not going to be afraid of any government agency as long as I don't break the law. So you want to try it? Try it. It wouldn't pay you to. Believe me, it wouldn't. I've been to your courts twice. I know your weaknesses. I know how yellow you are. And you know it too. And that's what's more important. The fact that I know that you operate on fear and intimidation. If we had more men in America behind the microphone, behind the television cameras, we'd have a better America. But as long as they got the pussies that are there now, there ain't much help. I'm Irv Homer. I'm glad I got it out of my system. We'll get into the modern militia movement. We'll get into the fraud of hijacking that suddenly seems to be a strange phenomenon when it's been around for a long time, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Irv Homer. We'll see you on Friday night. Spread the word, because you'll probably never hear this voice, although I was given an offer today that I may consider. I doubt it very much, because I will not be muzzled. That's why I do this program. Adios, Auf Wiedersehen, hasta luego, and ciao.